Well, hello again. Welcome to another exciting MicroGiants meeting. This is the interview portion of what we do. We've done several other interviews, but we've never done one with one of our own. We've got JP Beall here today to talk a little bit about his business and how he started it, and a little bit about his markets and any issues that he's run into. He's also involved with the MicroGiants in the sense that he's been a frequent panelist as well, and he has kind of a unique background. So fits in very nicely with the group of consultants that we have, and kind of old salts like John Mills and I. And John Mills will help us today in the interview, and he's quite involved in our expert series as well, and all things MicroGiants. So this should be really good. Let me just say a few things. Welcome, JP, and let me say a few things about your background. You have a pretty extensive educational background. You first went to well, I mean, this is from your LinkedIn. It shows that you were in Oxford, both in economics and early modern English history back in 2011 and 2013. Then you managed to finish up your BA in economics, Washington and Lee University. From there, then you switched over to Georgetown, where you ended up getting a MBA in business administration with, I think, a specialty in commercial real estate and international business diplomacy. And that goes along with what you did apparently at the Walsh School of Foreign Service while you were there. So you've been pretty busy boy from an educational standpoint. You're also very active in all kinds of history, in his historical society here in town, and various other historical kinds of endeavors. And you've got a kind of an interesting dimension there, as well as your foreign inspirations and your business inclinations. So you have quite an interesting background. Now, currently, you are working, I believe, in finance. Tell us a little bit about your regular daytime job.
Absolutely. So I work for a utility scale solar and battery storage developer that builds projects in the scale of hundreds or thousands of acres in many states across the country. There are a couple projects actually my company is working on right now here in California. I seem to be working on a lot of their Texas and Pennsylvania projects right now. Believe it or not, the sun does shine upon occasion in Pennsylvania. Um, and I work with a lot of the modeling and the financial performance for each of the projects. I work in a corner called project finance. So my team works with the development team in understanding, what the project is designed to do, what the output is expected to be like, and then conveying that to investors who either or banks who are providing either equity or debt investments in each of these projects.
So you're looking for big money for big projects, basically.
Basically.
Yeah, yeah, wow, pretty interesting. And so that kind of brings us a little bit to your other business, which you do as well, which is kind of unique and a little bit local and historical as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, well, I mean, I'll start by saying that my position is a full remote position and is with the developer, and that's really what enabled me to come back home. I grew up here in Redlands. All of my family is centered around here and in California. I did spend 10 years away back east in school and working in Chicago and in the DC area. And I started off in a general finance background, which basically relegated me to living in Chicago, San Francisco, or New York. Decided pretty quickly those were not places I wanted to live long term. So I set
Mhm.
about looking at doing something I could do anywhere. And so real estate was that outlet. And that's, ultimately what I focused on with um, my time at Georgetown. And then 2020 comes along, and I embraced the opportunity to take a role and bring it back with me here to Redlands. It's kind of an unusual career path for a lot of folks, but embraced the opportunity. And as the remote work environment developed around all this, I found placement with a firm. I'd been looking for the opportunity to sort of switch sides of the table. I had been working for a bank doing this just out of Georgetown, and wanted to start to work with a developer instead. And so that's what took me here. But in the process of coming home, first sort of out of necessity, the events of 2020 being what they were, I figured it was better to be close to family. And over over that period of time, even during a pandemic and everything else, um, kind of got the opportunity to re-engage with my hometown. And um, there are things I grew up with that I know that I myself, even with an interest in the history and the ecology of Redlands and towns like it across Southern California, perhaps appreciated it as part of the furniture. It was always there and it was always going to be there. But there are certain trends that are exerting pressure on what we take for granted here, and really began to think about why these things are special, not only for us, but just sort of on a broader scale of things. And so we had a variety of local museums or locally themed businesses or organizations that were looking for ways to connect newcomers to our community and just visitors in our community to what life is like here, but didn't exactly really have the ability to do that through products.
Mm.
It's challenging to be, say, a small historical museum, um, trying to earn revenue through your gift store to help keep the doors open and keep your preservation mission alive. When everybody's ordering off the same menu of commodity products that are coming from the Far East by and large,
Mm.
or if there's products that are themed on your local environment, it might say it in nice big letters, Redlands, City of Orange, Ventura, but be made miles away. And ultimately the only connection that product has to your particular location is the name that's printed on it, which, I'm not going to speak ill of that. There is certainly a place for it, but um, it leaves, I think, the consumer ultimately lacking in terms of appreciating what life is really like and what is special about life here. And so I began to think about this, watching orange groves get torn out and redeveloped. Just that growing up here, I was at an advantage. This was built in. When blossom season came around in February, um, we would pack up in our jammies, and my mom would pack us up in the car, and we'd roll the windows down. We'd just go for a drive out in the middle of the orange groves. And this was a period in time that the whole city just smelled of blossoms for an entire month. Just
Yeah.
spectacular.
Yeah.
And we've kind of arrived at a point where there are a lot of folks who don't really know that orange blossoms smell, or things like that. So, but I'm inclined to feel differently about saving an orange grove because I have those sentimental choices or sentimental attachments to these particular things. And so I began to feel that, the retail experience, particularly in terms of personal care or what you furnish your home with or what you put on your body, is a very intimate decision. You're inviting something like that into your life. And so I began to think about how products could be designed that would help introduce what I know and love about a particular theme, the beautiful orange groves and natural landscape of Southern California, to people who maybe just moved here yesterday and,
Mhm.
are looking for ways to engage with what's around them. And by the same token, provide products to places where those people go to learn more about our community, to help museums and places like the Mission Inn, where we sell, and it actually happens outside of their individual themed products like a Christmas ornament.
Yeah.
Old
In
California
Ri-
Botanicals is their best seller.
oh, wow, that's terrific. And that's in
Yeah,
Riverside, California, of course.
Riverside. Hmm. And so, and that's the other side of this coin, is that um, Redlands has a very particular experience, and it loves very much. And there are a smattering of other cities in Southern California, which were also citrus centers, that have similar experiences in a slightly different way, um, that ultimately have the same needs, I've found, as these things have come under stress recently. And um, so that is something that Old California Botanicals is setting out to do, is to serve all of these different communities in Southern California where there is sort of this vacancy, and do it in a way that helps people build bridges to what makes these places special, to that shared Old California experience, and to serve museums and other retail outlets that do this sort of thing and help them improve that experience, and then also to do it in a way that it supports the local economies that we're really talking about. Because what good is a T-shirt with an orange printed on it if ultimately the value of from that purchase doesn't actually go back to supporting the family farms that have been there for generations, that are the ones that are actually growing this produce.
Mhm.
And so it was out of this thought that my lip balms and the Gill Orange soap were born. Um, a lot of this actually kind of takes shape during COVID. I started doing this in 2021, when you're looking for hobbies to do. And what are people doing during this time but going through old boxes? And so my mom did a presentation on my great grandfather's history here in this town. And he's most commonly known as an engineer and an inventor, in the electricity space and batteries. So it's kind of funny. I'm working with batteries a little bit in my day job, but um,
Yeah.
just don't tell me which direction the current's supposed to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've
But
got you, John.
no, yeah, absolutely. And we were going through these boxes, and inside one of the boxes was this steel mold. There are two of them, actually. And inside this little round mold um, was a fossilized bar of soap. And looking at it's embossed. It says Gill Orange Soap on the face of it. And um, my great grandfather, had come from Ohio, someplace nice and cold, and um, had documented his arrival to Redlands like with a photo album. So we have like the first, second, third photos he'd taken after like stepping off the train at the Patton station up in Highland, and he'd taken the kite shaped track. And the first is the train station and the car. The second is a picture of a cactus, and then a third is an orange tree with him posing underneath it, holding it in like a bowler hat and a suit, just grinning ear to ear. And so he went absolutely orange crazy when he arrived here. And so he had a day job, but he was also eventually a citrus grove owner. He also owned several packing houses, the 7th Street Packing House and the Orangedale Packing House. And so that history is themed in some of our products. But I guess it must have been a slow day at the factory. He was making these soap molds, and wanted to find a way to bring the smell of oranges into the house year round, even when they weren't in season. And so that was the birth of Gill Orange Soap. It wasn't a
Oh,
product. It was just something he made for himself for his house.
oh,
And
wow.
so, um, it's again, there was that little connection point, and that was something I felt like I wanted to share with people, and help them experience it the way he did, when he saw these things as special. And so it's really our oldest product. It's our first. And so, I began to think about other ways we could use sort of waste product for oranges because, um, you know, oranges have to be a certain size in order to be sold commercially to a grocery store, and that's really the most profitable line of business. But if you can't do that, the oranges that are small or you know irregularly shaped, those end up at a juice factory. And to a to an orange farmer, that's basically breaking even. That's paying like your bills. Nobody's making money off of that. And you might press the juices out of the orange, but then what do you do with the peel? Sometimes in the process, you can render essential oil out of the peel, which I make use of later. But then the peel could be used as hog feed or as fertilizer, or you know, at that point it's basically waste. So what on earth do you do with the peel? So one modification I did make, because I certainly wasn't about to cut into a 100-year-old bar of soap, of which I only have one, is I began to dry orange peel from oranges that we were growing, and began to use it as a natural exfoliant. And so that's in each of our Gill Orange soap bars. So, the oil that goes into fragrancing the soap comes from local citrus, and then, of course, the peel does as well. Um, and but the thing that's really seemed to have taken off is our lip balm, which not only uses essential oils and extracts from things found here locally. We're making it now in a dozen flavors, including just plain beeswax, an unflavored version. But it's also made with local beeswax sourced from here in the Redlands area, as well as up near Ventura. These large beekeeping concerns rotate bees to different locations as crops flower. So that's how you end up with all these different flavors of honey. So there's a provider here in town that is a large scale beekeeper and was producing all this beeswax, which generally they sell the honey. The beeswax is another thing they were looking to sell. And so the lip balm is made from local beeswax from bees that pollinate the groves that produce the fruit that produce the essential oil that's also in the lip balm. So that again was really sort of the laser focus on local sourcing, and something I kind of understood growing up here. And those are all there's yes, here are the products here. So yeah, we have a dozen flavors. Of course, our navel orange is our fan favorite. We have a couple twists on that for the holidays, the orange peppermint and orange cranberry you see there. We have a lavender, like lavender from Highland Springs. We have Oakland apple. That needs no explanation. And wild violet. We have a passion fruit orange guava sunscreen version. So, and then even things like that mistletoe candle. Mistletoe grows locally. Maybe not a lot of people know that or understand that, but growing up here in town, it wasn't uncommon that around the holidays you'd see children selling mistletoe on the corner, or you see it being sold in the store as a charity item. Like for the local animal shelter, I think does it from time to time. But that grows up in Oak Glen and all around the area. So that's really what these products were designed to do, was to help people connect with those experiences, and even if they don't become a preservationist like I am, they might look at and see these things differently afterwards. But at the very least, if it's fresh and local and made from the highest quality inputs, at least have a superlative experience with it. And so subconsciously shift it from being commonplace to being a luxury item, to being something that's superlative in its own way.
Right. John, you've got some questions for him, I'm sure. Well, yeah, fascinating story, actually, JP. And obviously, from a mental aspect of your early development, your training in economics and your training as an MBA is all extremely valuable to being able to make decisions on this business. What I find interesting is the depth that this old California Botanicals has. I mean, it's 100 years old. That's correct, right?
Well, the soap is from a 100-year-old tradition, but
It's a,
the business itself I founded, I guess, 3 years ago now.
yeah. So
But
the
you're
integrity
using,
of it comes from the formulation
yeah.
and some of the products that are 100 years old,
Yeah.
Precisely.
and then the actual mechanical aspect of the business is relatively new, but it's
Hmm.
based on the purity and the age of well, your grandfather or your great grandfather coming in, and it's quite fascinating. How did you make the shift from being relatively Fortune 500, Fortune 50 type business to still doing that, but now coming into this smaller family owned business that has a high degree of integrity to its product?
Well, that's a great question, and that was another aspect of my journey in sort of finding a career path. And I started working for a large insurance company. I was then working for a large bank, and um, that has its benefits for a lot of people. But you know, particularly in the real estate field, I found myself getting asked, it's sort of a family business in a way. Like a lot of people come into real estate because they were exposed to it as a pattern from family members, or maybe they were bitten by the bug, but there was something that introduced them to real estate as an industry. And in thinking about entrepreneurship, I think they say something similar about entrepreneurship, is that generally people become entrepreneurs because they've seen it modeled in some way.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, and in my particular case, a lot of my family members are self-employed or run their own small businesses. I mean, my grandpa Gill founded his own battery company at age 19 without the benefit of a college education. I just am
And it lasted for
constantly in awe.
a long, long time. And he ended, didn't he also, or one of your family members sell that to Teledyne at one point? Yeah.
He sold it in
So very successful.
1966.
Yeah.
And it's actually the only business in Teledyne that's permitted to run under its original brand. They
Mm.
didn't successfully integrate the business into the
Mhm.
company because people began to see batteries out there with Teledyne's name on it and said, well, who's Teledyne? Like, I buy Gill.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I mean, to that end, I was very fortunate to see modeled in my mom and my uncles and my grandparents this pattern of entrepreneurship, and that is a particular way of life that
Yeah.
enables people to do things, and it enables people to do things for themselves as well as for their communities. And um, that's, I think, sort of a pattern that is different from corporate life. And it's a pattern that I think feels very familiar and good for me. And so, one thing I really liked about making the switch to working for a developer was that it was a smaller, more entrepreneurial company. And so it has that attitude and aspect to that work pattern. And it's, something that you can feel personally the value that you're adding into the company. Um, and then that's something I found here in this business as well. It's an entrepreneurial outlet for me, a creative outlet even. Although I'm one of those people that actually feels that you can be creative in a financial field if you think about it in the right way. You just have to look past all the Excel. But um, I to sort of answer your question there, I mean, it felt right making that move. And maybe this is something that just continues as a part-time thing. Maybe it's something that grows. I don't really know, but that's I was raised in a family where basically if you see a need, you fill it. And that's really what OCB is all about.
Yeah, and as I'm looking at your website, which by the way is very simply oldcaliforniabotanicals.com,
Mouthful.
but it is one sense, but it's very accurate. The marketing and the branding that you have is very clear. It's very unnoisy, very. It's not old-fashioned. It's fresh in its coloration. How did you? You kind of ventured into this. You got this finance gene, right, and this business development. And now, how did you manage to get a clean, tight branding?
Well, and that's another great question. And I think that gets at the other side of that coin on entrepreneurship, is that you're a jack of all trades.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is still something I'm learning and growing in certain aspects. I mean, when it comes to a tight set of financial statements, I'm your guy. And the manufacturing and things, but I'm actually regretting, although I think to a certain degree coursework on the subject in college is very much pointed towards corporate employment. And so marketing classes can be very useful for a large corporate application, but can be a little incompatible, I think, with small entrepreneurial ventures. And that's what I've found really valuable in participating in MicroGiants over I guess it's been about a year now.
Yeah.
And it's that, the practical aspect of learning how to market and brand a business as it's run can feel very different from the academic coursework that is offered. And your point's well taken, John. How do I walk this line with this brand where there is this rich heritage that I am hoping to help people connect to?
Yes.
But unfortunately, there is also the person that when you see history or historic, you think it's outmoded, it's obsolete, or they just sort of glaze over and lose interest. And while some of these items are, have a long history, and we hope that adds richness to product experience, I was also trying to weigh that with demonstrating that we're not speaking about citrus agriculture or any of this in the past tense, that it is still relevant today. It's still cutting edge. It can still be exciting. And so I suppose there's a bit of a compromise in the middle of sort of being historic chic to help bring the citrus industry kicking and screaming into the 21st century, while at the same time help people recognize why all this is here. And so it's, I guess, a little bit of a push and a pull, and I'm still, toying a little bit with the balance. But we wanted people to feel that there was this historic depth while still being very fresh and relevant.
Yeah, and I think you've done a pretty good job on that. I think that, authenticity is something that is very clearly paramount with you. And not only authenticity in terms of the materials that the products are made from, although, it doesn't necessarily scream that. It certainly does talk, when you're talking about the old recipes and your great grandfather and the kind of the old California, there's an authenticity, I think, that really works. It doesn't have to look like a cowboy outfit, just because it's old California. And that'd be really old California when we still had, a lot of beef cows running around in the valley. That was a long time ago. But I think that you've achieved that. As you were speaking about your product and why it is what it is and how you thought about it, I just kept thinking to myself, market niche, market niche, market niche. Because that's one of the main reasons that small businesses survive. I don't think that contrasting, say, school with what we do at MicroGiants is that, we recognized early that you have to have a market that you don't get stomped on, because the big guys can clearly do that. And if you don't fit in the cracks, as it were, you just get stepped on. So you just have to find a way to develop a market. And so the issue is, well, is the market big enough to be able to accomplish your goals and that sort of thing? And you're in a process of discovery there. And because of your situation and the way you've started it, you have a lot of flexibility.
Mm.
It's not like you're not going to eat if you don't sell enough lip balm, tomorrow. So that's kind of a good thing, because it gives you staying power, and it also allows you to maintain this authenticity, I think, that will become, I think, part of the hallmark of old California botanicals. So I think that kind of all works together. But I do know that you feel as though you've struggled a little bit. Tell us, in terms of the marketing side, tell us how you think say the first year and a half, 2 years launch has been, and how many outlets have you got? How many ways do you sell it? I know you're selling to retailers, and you also have an online store. So tell us about that multifaceted approach.
Absolutely. And yes, so I mean, it's been a growing experience and a learning opportunity since jumping in, and sort of seeing what needs to happen for the business. Whether I'm an expert or not, I'm doing it. And marketing is one of those things that I did strike, you know, early as being important, but not really being something I had much exposure to. And um, so, I mean, in one sense, I could, as we were talking about, try to replicate something that was used to market these products 100 years ago. And while those might be interesting, would it still work now? And I mean, we have integrated pieces of the packaging from 100 years ago, the label artwork that used to be on citrus crates, into how our products are displayed with our retail partners.
Mhm.
And so it really did begin as a wholesale business, to sell to Gerard's Market, to Jacinto Farms while they were open, to the Mission Inn, or with the California Citrus State Park, and as well as up at the Ventura Agricultural Museum. So we're up as far north as Ojai, as far down as Oceanside, as far east as Yucaipa.
Okay.
And so that's one aspect, actually, is that Redlands is very free in tooting its own horn about the citrus capital thing. But
Oh yeah.
but
I
but
don't think you mentioned, but at least Redlands believes that it was the citrus capital of the world uh, around 1910 or so. And I
and
believe that there's something behind that too. Yeah.
yes, and I mean, we just lost our last packing house this last year.
Yeah.
And in talking about economics constructs, that is a marketing model that has basically gone obsolete, in our area at least. And of course, it poses challenges because the structure of the industry is still pointed very much towards a packing house model.
Mhm.
But that ended up taking a lot of value off the top for the orange farmer,
Mhm.
because it was the packing house that basically held a monopoly on marketing citrus to the public,
Mhm.
on a commercial scale. Um, but Riverside believes much the same thing, as does Santa Paula and Fillmore. And the differences there, I think, are different types of citrus grew in each of those areas. But of course, Redlands, even now, still sort of a fulfillment center, was doing the fulfillment on fruit packing, not only for navel oranges, but for all kinds of citrus, even
Mhm.
pears, stone fruit, other things for the entire Southwest. They were shipping pears down from Oregon and apples from Washington, down to Redlands to be sorted through a packing house and then dropped on a rail car with ice that we produced here locally, and then shipped out through the rail networks in San
Yeah.
Bernardino.
Yeah.
So we had 35 packing houses at its very peak. at the turn of the 20th century, and now we've just lost our last one. So helping the citrus industry and just the agricultural industry in Redlands think about its way forward is something that I'm very passionate about, but that's not ultimately your question. So I mean, there was kind of a sense of, well, what should the packaging look like? We've already sort of touched on. But then, is this experience only relevant in the areas that have this sort of laying around? And, the fact is, there was a very large, booming global tourist industry of folks coming to this area to experience the Redlands area, back in the days when people could take 3-month vacations. Sincerely wish we lived in those times, but that is not the way that works anymore. And one thing I've found really gratifying was actually working through an Amazon handmade store. My younger brother is an artist, and so he sells products through Amazon Handmade. And actually, it came to the point that that's basically his whole business now. And that's not really my intention, but it's very gratifying to see that the people who buy from me on Amazon, and I still package every package and drop it off at the post office myself. But
sounds like a guy by the name of Bezos a few years ago.
A little bit. Putting the bees in Bezos, I guess.
So
but
you can never tell,
Well, now he's figuring out how to fit a boat under a bridge. So one can only hope. But there's a handmade section on Amazon that helps. Actually, it eliminates the fees for putting a listing up on Amazon.com. And so I began to market my stuff there, knowing that there are a lot of people who live in cold places or places that don't grow oranges, where that exoticism still exists. And I found that that's actually true. The people who buy on Amazon, we've serviced almost every state in the union. During the holiday season, it ends up being 10 to 20% of my year.
Yeah.
But there are people buying up in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Buzz on the audio. Is anyone else hearing that, Ron?
I'm okay on this end.
Okay.
Yeah.
But all these far-flung places still find, today, as they did 100 years ago, what we have here as a resource, special and exotic. So people in Nebraska, people in Ohio, the appeal is broader than, say, just Southern California. Now, I can't go deliver all those places. And shipping does make it difficult for a business-to-business network there, but a direct-to-consumer network still works. So that's been gratifying. And California is a little bit of a bad word in certain parts of the country now, but even beyond that, there's still some appeal. Like this classic vision of California still has staying power with people.
Well, and I think that there are an awful lot of, there are ways you could go. Bees, Burt's Bees, lip balm, I mean, obviously did extremely well. And that was really about beeswax as a same thing that you're doing. I mean, as a natural kind of way to get lip balm. And I think oranges certainly has a certain appeal. Beall, yeah. And other products do, as do avocados and so forth. And so I think that there is a way that if you found that there was ever a backlash to California, which I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I mean, living here maybe, but not necessarily buying. I mean, surfing is still a big deal, and I don't think that'll ever go away. So there's a whole lot about California that's still pretty good, but I do think that there's an interest. It's a different story than most people think about. And growing up in Colorado, it was all about the Beach Boys and surfing and Disneyland and Hollywood. So, I'm not sure if people really stop to think about, well, oranges. Might think of Florida, but you wouldn't necessarily. And that is kind of going away. So it is a little bit of a preservation of an old way of life that really happened from the 1880s until the 1950s. And it was really big out here. Even though
Absolutely.
Orange County is named for oranges, it was never as big in Orange County as it is in what we call the Inland Empire here. So
Well,
that was just to get people to move there. That was a promotional thing, I think.
I have some numbers for you, actually. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
here's my finance guy showing, but I'm a numbers guy, and I've researched a bit about this because naturally, since I work in the renewable energy space, when people talk about the impact of building a solar farm, and I suppose that was the other thing that really irked me, was that, when we talk about building a solar farm, and the federal government, the EPA, lays out these guidelines on how to do this math. You speak often in terms of acres of trees planted. Like building this 1,000-acre solar farm has the equivalent environmental impact to planting 1,000 acres of trees. Just notional numbers. But not every tree is created equally. Certain trees have more or less carbon capture impact. So when the EPA is talking about a tree, we're talking about an economic average. The tree doesn't exactly exist. It's sort of what the carbon impact of natural forest, the average US natural forest, whatever that means, does over the course of a year. But when you look at citrus agriculture or avocado agriculture, their carbon capture ability far outpaces the average acre of natural forest. Why is that? Back east, those trees are deciduous, and so they drop their leaves in the winter. Or out west or at higher elevations, they are coniferous. They have pine needles. And so the carbon capture impact of coniferous trees or deciduous trees is limited. You're not capturing carbon when you've dropped your leaves for the winter. And so here you have a broadleaf tree in the shape of an avocado tree or an orange tree that keeps its leaves year round. And in fact, it comes from a very tropical area originally. All these trees here are from Bahia, Brazil, these navel oranges.
Yeah.
And because of agriculture, they're planted more densely than trees might occur in nature. And so that compounding impact means that an acre of orange grove removes more than 2.5 times the amount of carbon that an acre of natural forest might.
Wow.
And actually only 15% less than an acre of Amazon rainforest. And so it is, as far as the United States is concerned, about as close as we get short of sequoia or redwood forests, because those trees are massive,
Yeah.
to an Amazon rainforest.
I guess I better plant a couple more orange trees.
Absolutely. I mean, these things are doing the yeoman's work, keeping our air clean.
Yeah.
And I mean, combine that with the figure, sort of what you're alluding to. Just at the end of World War II, California contained 400,000 acres total of citrus trees, of commercial citrus. Today, that is only 300,000 acres. So the acreage under planting for citrus has shrunk by 25%.
Yeah.
Closer to 30, actually. I'm using round numbers, but
Yeah.
And actually 15% of that acreage loss occurred in this valley. So in this valley, we had 60,000 at our peak. Today we have 2,200.
Oh my gosh, that's really a big, huge difference.
Orange County had about 60,000 across the entire county. Now there is less than 100. There's actually only 1 acre left in the city of Orange, which is kept as a preserve. The last orange grove in all of the San Fernando Valley was just ripped out this year, and that was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It's going to be developed for apartments. Um, and so that's sort of the theme here, is there is a bit of a decline in this space here, because citrus happens to occupy land that is highly desirable. People want to live there. That's I suppose, the double-edged sword to the California dream, is that eventually people want to come and live there. And, that's fine. That's great. But there is an impact to that. So a loss of 100,000 acres of trees that are almost like the Amazon rainforest. We talk about the deforestation of Brazil, or of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. Maybe we should be thinking a little differently about these agricultural resources that are actually helping things. The core thing to being green is not necessarily more solar farms; it's to keeping green things around us. So, I think it's a way that people don't actually think about this agriculture here anymore. Historically, there was a pollutive aspect with smudging, but that's illegal, and it has been for 75 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
They have new ways of keeping those oranges warm, and those occasionally when that happens.
And the climate is warmer. The risk of freeze is not as high now as it was 100 years ago.
Yeah, right.
So, anyway, I mean, in terms of citrus agriculture, I think we should be keeping the acreage we've got and planting more of it, and finding ways to make it profitable for people to do so and to keep doing so. I'm not going to say no to development. I don't believe in that, but I think there are ways that it can be done intelligently around these resources. And if the market isn't quite capturing the importance of these groves, then there are ways to act within the market to help correct an asymmetry of information, which is my economics talking, I guess. But
well, you have a really complex story, which I think is fine, because today that's one of the ways you differentiate from other products is the reason behind it. So there's a social reason behind it, there's a historical reason behind it, and it turns out there may also be an ecological reason behind it. So you're kind of getting all at least three and probably more markets in terms of desirability. And so what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be as we kind of wrap up here,
Sure.
in terms of growing your business in the next few years?
Well, I'm in sort of a funny place where there's growing pains, and I'm beginning to feel sort of limits on my capacity. So, I've begun to consider, how to bring contractors on, which is, a new thing for me. And I've been getting some great assistance on that with my social media, with, someone that I trust and have known for a while, and understands where my head's at on all this. So, I mean, I feel that he's able to really express some of these ideas and do it in a way that's user friendly. And try to push down further on the e-commerce thing. And find ways to access other markets other than sort of just going door to door and forming those relationships one by one. So I think it's about how to make myself accessible to people. And websites are hard. You already knew that, Ron, but I'm finding out websites are very hard, and e-commerce is hard. And I don't know of any other way around it other than experience. And so that's currently where I'm hitting my head up against the wall, is learning how to set up a Shopify store and, do integrations with Facebook and try to provide a comparable e-commerce experience that, is true to where the market's at right now.
And it's a challenge when you're small to be able to do that, especially to try and do it completely yourself, because everybody's competing with Amazon. And that kind of seamless experience, and everybody kind of wants to do what's easy. And I find myself buying from Amazon more than I would like to, because it's just too convenient, too easy to do.
Sure.
And so it's nice to hear that you are doing some work, with Amazon, so that you can begin to see that channel and see how that goes. Do you see any conflict between your retail customers and your online channels?
Well, not really.
Okay.
And I've designed my Amazon store in such a way. I mean, for one thing, because the product itself is small, it has to be sold in a certain amount of quantity for that to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at a certain dollar value. I mean, if you look at the way things are priced, everything on Amazon seems to cost around $10, the $10 store. And that's sort of the pricing structure. That's sort of a sweet spot or a break point in how those things are priced. And that's why you see that. And I do advise my partner retailers on suggested retail prices. So that way I don't ever end up competing with those wholesalers
Right.
who I feel are, my primary customers. And I find that most people who have encountered me so far have encountered me through those partner retailers where they have that relationship, and I want that relational feeling with the product.
Mm-hmm.
So generally they will prefer to buy it, at a partner retailer if that opportunity is at all available.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've built, the product bundles in such a way and priced them that, there's room enough for me to run a retail business separately without necessarily cannibalizing local sales. And I do find actually, in terms of my Amazon sales, like I can see where all these orders are going. The orders by and large really aren't local. They're places where I really just don't have a partner retailer. And so, but it's a balance for sure, because I do think there needs to be both. Diversified revenue streams are important for a business of any size. And so I think figuring out how to keep the peas and carrots separate is important, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, good. John, you have a wrap-up question for today?
Well, actually, more a wrap-up comment, I think. It's, first of all, delightful to hear a little bit more of the fullness of the background, JP. I'm fascinated because I think you have a lot of depth to your story personally and your educational background, because you're very concerned with the environment, but you're not a radical environmentalist. You're very concerned with finance, but you're not a business first, profits first individual. So you've got this space, which is actually very attractive, I believe, to people who authentically want a very, very solid product that has history, it is well designed, it's got heritage to it. And so I almost sense like, more of your story to go and how you got here, including your grandfather and the 100-year journey, I think is valuable. It's part of the American pioneering experience. And I think that is very attractive. People, I think it appears like you're buying authentic part of America heritage product. And yet and still, it's a new, clean, up-to-date experience.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's very encouraging. And I think Redlands itself has a lot more background that could be woven into your story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so that is another part of the marketing balance, and hopefully I can lean into all of it. It's as I say, that Redlands sees itself as the citrus capital, and so does Riverside, and so does Ventura. So anytime they see Redlands, it's like, well, what about Ventura, or what about Riverside? So that's still a marketing question I'm working on.
There's no question concerning that. We know the answer.
The day will come. The day will come when you'll be able to say, do you have any local products like these? Therefore, Redlands must be the winner, because we're the only one with these great locally made products from local agriculture. So, well, this has been really terrific. It's been wonderful to hear a little bit more about your business. And so we thank everybody for showing up, and thank you very much, JP, for enlightening us a little bit about your business. Good success to you.
Well,